I've heard people say that childhood defines who you are, that it builds the foundation you either stand on or spend the rest of your life trying to repair. If that's true, then my foundation was cracked from the beginning. My name is Lena Carter, and for as long as I can remember, I was the one in my family who was different. Not the golden child, not the smart one, not the athletic one, just the odd one out. And in my family, being different wasn't celebrated. It was criticized, mocked, and used against me at every opportunity. I was the youngest of three. My brother Ethan was the star athlete, the kind who racked up trophies that my parents polished weekly and displayed in a glass cabinet in the living room. My sister Claire was the academic prodigy, the one who scored high on every test, who teachers bragged about at parent-teacher conferences, who was already talking about Ivy League dreams before she was even in high school. And then there was me. I wasn't dumb, though. That's the word they branded me with early on, but I learned differently. Numbers tangled in my brain. Spelling felt like a cruel game, and I froze whenever eyes were on me. While Ethan and Claire soaked in praise, I got sighs, furrowed brows, and the dreaded phrase, "Lena, what is wrong with you?" My father was the worst about it. He was an accountant by trade, a man who believed intelligence could be measured strictly by test scores and neat calculations. To him, success was defined by black and white answers. And I lived in shades of gray. I loved stories, painting, music. The things that didn't come with right or wrong answers, but with emotions and interpretations. He had no patience for that. "Honestly, Lena," he would mutter, shaking his head as he compared my report card with Claire's, "I don't know how you can come from the same family. Look at this. Claire has straight A's, Ethan has B's and A's, and he's balancing sports. And you're barely hanging on with C's. Are you even trying?" I was trying. Harder than they could ever imagine. I stayed up at night staring at math problems until the numbers blurred into nonsense. I reread chapters 3 times, trying to understand what teachers explained in one quick lesson. But my efforts were invisible to them, eclipsed by the effortless brilliance of my siblings. Claire was especially cruel about it. She had the sharpness of my father and the smugness of someone who'd always been told she was superior. At dinner, she'd casually ask, "So, Lena, did you fail another quiz today?" with that fake innocence that made Mom chuckle. Or she'd lean over when Dad was helping me with homework and whisper, "Don't you get it? It's so simple. Even a child could do this." But I was a child, and apparently not a very good one in their eyes. The label dumb started as little jokes, but soon became my identity within the family. When something got misplaced, Ethan would laugh. Probably Lena. She's too dumb to remember where she put it. When I tripped or spilled something, it was classic Lena. Dumb as always. Even my mother, who wasn't as harsh as Dad or Claire, reinforced it by saying things like, "That's just how Lena is. Sweet, but not the brightest." It burned. It hollowed me out. And worst of all, I started to believe it. At school, I hoped to find a safe place, somewhere I could breathe without the constant comparisons. But kids notice things. Teachers talk. And Claire had a wide reach. By middle school, my reputation followed me into classrooms. Teachers would look at my last name and ask, "Oh, are you Claire's sister?" She was one of my best students. Their tone would change after the first test. Interesting. That was their code word for disappointing. My classmates picked up on it too. "Claire's the genius, right?" So what happened to you? I learned to sit quietly at the back to avoid attention. I doodled in my notebooks when math lessons got too fast for me. I scribbled down song lyrics and little stories that nobody would ever read. It was the only place I felt like I had control, where my words weren't judged as wrong, just mine. But at home, those notebooks were proof of my failure. Instead of wasting time drawing nonsense, maybe study. Dad barked one evening when he found one. He ripped a page out, a sketch I'd worked on for hours, and crumpled it into the trash. I felt my chest cave in as Claire snickered behind him. I wanted to scream, "This is me trying." But my voice never came out. It never did. One memory still plays in my head like a cruel movie reel. My 15th birthday. I had hoped, maybe foolishly, That for one day my family would set aside their sharp tongues and see me as worthy of celebration. I had dropped hints about a book I wanted, a journal with a leather cover. I imagined filling it with my words, maybe even writing a whole novel someday. When the time came, I sat at the table, heart racing, waiting for my turn. Ethan got me a basketball signed by his teammates. Claire gave me a pen so you can at least try to write neatly. She joked, and everyone laughed. And my parents. They gave me a tutoring voucher. 6 sessions with Mrs. Brown, Mom said, smiling as if she'd handed me gold. Dad added, maybe she can knock some sense into that head of yours. Happy birthday, Lena. My throat tightened. I forced a smile, but inside I shattered. They didn't see me. They didn't hear me. They only saw what I wasn't. That night, alone in my room, I cried into my pillow until my chest hurt. I promised myself something in that moment, though. One day, I'll prove them wrong. One day, they'll regret calling me dumb. But proving them wrong wasn't so easy when every step felt like walking through mud while everyone else sprinted on solid ground. I should mention there was one person who kept me from collapsing completely. My grandmother. She didn't live with us, but she visited often. And unlike the rest of my family, she noticed me, really noticed me. She'd sit with me on the porch, knitting or sipping tea, and ask about my stories. She never called them nonsense. Your mind works differently, Lena, she said once, her voice soft but steady. Different doesn't mean less. It just means the world hasn't caught up to you yet. Her words were like water in a desert. She encouraged me to keep writing, to embrace the way I saw the world. She even bought me a second-hand typewriter from a garage sale, telling me every writer needs their tool. It was old, clunky, and missing a key, but to me it was treasure. I kept it hidden under my bed, tapping out stories when the house was quiet. In those moments, I felt powerful. Like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as broken as they made me feel. High school was when things came to a head. Claire was already off to college, sending home letters about her perfect grades and prestigious scholarships. Ethan was captain of the basketball team, his name in the local paper. And me. I was still the one teacher's side at the one who tripped over presentations. The one who avoided eye contact whenever test scores were handed back. At dinner, Dad would ask, "So, Lena, any good news?" I'd stammer. I passed my English exam barely." Claire would cut in from the other end of the phone on speaker. "But hey, that's good for Lena." Everyone would laugh, except me. What they didn't know was that behind the scenes, I was working harder than I ever had. I stayed after school for extra help. I read study guides until my eyes burned. I even taught myself techniques to manage my focus and memory. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But slowly, painfully, things began to click. I got a B+ in history, an A in English. For once, my grades weren't drowning. But when I showed my report card, my father barely looked up. Still not at Claire's level. And Claire. She scoffed. "Congrats, Lena. You're average now." That's when I realized something important. No matter how much I improved, they would never acknowledge it. Not until I surpassed the box they had shoved me into. That realization lit a fire in me. By junior year, I stopped trying to win their approval directly. Instead, I started playing the long game. I studied quietly, obsessively, pouring hours into subjects I used to dread. I stayed up until dawn writing essays and solving problems. I sought out teachers who believed in me, who gave me tips and resources I could use. It wasn't about proving myself to my family anymore. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't what they said I was. But deep down, a secret part of me still wanted that moment, that day when they would be forced to see me, really see me, for who I was. And as graduation loomed, I could feel it building like a storm waiting on the horizon. Because they thought I was barely scraping by. They thought I'd walk across the stage quietly, unnoticed. They had no idea what was coming. Graduation was only a few weeks away, and our school was buzzing with end-of-year events. Promposals decorated the hallways, seniors counted down the days. And teachers reminded us of final projects and award ceremonies. For most people, it was a time of joy and anticipation. For me, it was a pressure cooker. On the outside, I pretended to be indifferent. I gave casual shrugs when classmates asked if my parents were coming to the upcoming senior awards night. But inside, I dreaded it. I knew my family would show up. Not because of me, of course, but because Ethan was coming home for the weekend. And Claire, who was already in her junior year at college, had arranged her schedule to attend. Family gatherings like this always ended the same way, me being the butt of their jokes. Still, a tiny part of me clung to hope. I'd worked hard, harder than they could imagine. I had seen my name listed quietly on the bulletin board under Honor Society graduates. It wasn't a big, flashy announcement, but it was real. Proof that I wasn't the dumb one anymore. I thought maybe, just maybe, that night could shift things. The night before the awards ceremony, Mom insisted we all sit down for dinner together. She wanted a family bonding evening, which in my family usually translated to let's all take turns pointing out Lena's flaws. The dining table was set with her best china, and the air smelled of roasted chicken and garlic bread. Ethan swaggered in first, still radiating that athlete's confidence even though he hadn't touched a professional court. He slapped my back hard enough to make me stumble. "Hey, little sis," he grinned. "Still flunking algebra, or have you graduated to failing calculus now?" I forced a laugh, though my stomach tightened. "I passed calculus, actually." "Barely, I bet," Claire cut in, sliding into her chair like she owned the place. She wore that Ivy League hoodie that she never missed a chance to flaunt. Meanwhile, I got into the dean's list again. "But don't worry, Lena, we can't all be brilliant." Dad chuckled at that, raising his glass of wine. "At least you know your strengths, Claire. And Ethan, you were the star of your team. Makes me proud. As for you, Lena," he paused, swirling his wine. "Well, you try. I'll give you that. You try?" The words stung more than if he had outright called me a failure. Trying was all I had ever done, but to him it was the equivalent of being useless. Grandma Nora cleared her throat. "Don't dismiss her like that. Lena has been working very hard. You might be surprised by her." Dad waved a dismissive hand. Hard work doesn't mean results. The conversation moved on without me, as usual. They discussed Claire's summer internship, Ethan's coaching gig, and Dad's latest golf tournament. My name never came up again. I sat there, smiling tightly, silently counting down the hours until I could prove them all wrong. The auditorium smelled faintly of old carpet and anticipation. Rows of chairs filled quickly with parents, siblings, and students dressed in their best. The stage glimmered with spotlights, a podium at the center, and a long table where shiny certificates and trophies waited. I sat sandwiched between my parents, Ethan, and Claire. My palms were sweaty, my heart pounding. I knew my name would be called later, but the waiting was agony. The ceremony began with the principal welcoming everyone. Applause filled the room as students were recognized for sports, music, and academics. My classmates walked proudly across the stage, shaking hands, beaming as their families cheered. When Ethan's old basketball teammate won Athlete of the Year, my brother clapped louder than anyone. "That could have been me if I didn't hurt my knee," he muttered proudly, as though his shadow still lingered on the court. Claire whispered smugly, "Bet Lena won't even get called. Unless there's an award for most likely to confuse 2 plus 2. Ethan snorted. Dad smirked. Mom gave a half-hearted, "Oh, don't be mean," but she didn't defend me either. My throat burned, but I kept my head high. Finally, the principal began announcing the scholastic honors. My heart raced. This was it. My name was on the list. But before they got to me, something happened that I'll never forget. The teacher presenting the awards mispronounced another student's name, fumbling nervously. The audience chuckled, and that was all the opening my sister needed. Claire leaned over, loud enough for our road to hear, and whispered, "Bet when they get to Lena, they'll just skip her. Or maybe they'll spell dumb across the certificate instead of her name." Ethan laughed so hard he nearly doubled over. Dad shook his head, smiling like it was comedy night. Even a couple of parents in front of us turned slightly, curious about the commotion. Heat rushed up my neck. My cheeks burned crimson. I wanted to vanish into the chair. The teacher moved on, calling more names, and with each cheer and applause, my humiliation grew heavier. Then the unthinkable happened. When the list of Honor Society graduates began, Claire piped up again. This time, louder. Maybe Lena bribed someone to get on the list, because there's no way she earned it. The people around us heard. Heads turned. A ripple of laughter spread. I felt every eye on me. The dumb Carter kid. The one who didn't belong. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously. Not here. Not now. The announcer reached the C's. My chest tightened. My hands shook. Lena Carter. The auditorium fell into a strange hush. For a split second, it was like the entire room was processing what they'd just heard. My name, in the same breath as Honors. I rose slowly, my legs trembling. I could feel my family's stunned silence, the disbelief radiating from their seats. Claire's mouth hung open. Ethan stopped mid-laugh. Dad's wine smirk disappeared. I walked down the aisle, my heart hammering, each step heavy but purposeful. When I reached the stage, the teacher smiled warmly and handed me the certificate. Congratulations, Lena. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, but it was real. Genuine. I stood under the spotlight, certificate in hand, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. I turned slightly and my eyes locked with my family's. Their faces were priceless. Shock, confusion, even a flicker of embarrassment. But inside me, there was only resolve. This was just the beginning. The silence in the car afterward was suffocating. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional turn signal. Finally, Dad broke the silence. Well, he said gruffly, good for you, Lena. I didn't expect that. Neither did anyone else, Claire muttered under her breath, still seething. I clenched my fists in my lap. I wanted to scream, to ask them why they couldn't just be proud without dragging me down. But I bit my tongue. Yet. Mom tried to smooth things over. It was a nice surprise, she said softly. Maybe Lena's finally growing out of her struggles. I stared out the window, my reflection blurry in the glass. Finally, as if my hard work had been nothing more than an accident. That night, I lay awake in bed, certificate clutched in my hands. The humiliation of their mockery still echoed in my ears, but so did the sound of my name being called. I made another promise to myself. Graduation will be the day. The day they can't deny me anymore. In the days leading up to graduation, the tension at home thickened. Claire barely looked at me, still stewing over the fact that I'd been recognized. Ethan teased me less, but when he did, it was sharper, as if to reassert dominance. Dad stayed quiet, though I caught him staring at me a few times. It's like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't want to admit existed. Grandma Nora, however, pulled me aside one afternoon. They're rattled, Lena, she whispered, patting my hand. Good, let them be. You've worked for this moment, and no one can take it from you. Her words gave me strength, because graduation wasn't just going to be a ceremony. It was going to be my reckoning, and they had no idea what was coming. Graduation morning arrived with a sky as clear as glass. Sunlight spilling through my window like a spotlight. I woke before my alarm, heart pounding, the certificate from awards night still taped proudly above my desk. I had stared at it every night since, as if reminding myself, this is real. This is me. They can't deny it anymore. I dressed carefully, a simple white dress under my graduation gown, hair pinned neatly, makeup minimal but intentional. For once, I wanted to look the part of someone who belonged in the spotlight. Downstairs, the house was buzzing. Ethan had rolled in late from a friend's party, but still strutted around like the star of the show. Claire was glued to her phone, probably posting some pretentious caption about supporting her little sister. My parents moved briskly, making sure the camera batteries were charged and programs were tucked into Mom's purse. No one said a word to me. Not congratulations, not are you ready. Just silence. As though they couldn't quite process the idea that I had made it this far. But Grandma Nora hugged me tightly when we pulled up to the school. Today is yours, Lena, she whispered into my ear. Don't let anyone steal it. I held on to those words like armor. The football field had been transformed with rows of white chairs, a stage draped in maroon and gold, and a podium where teachers shuffled nervously with their notes. Families filled the bleachers, fanning themselves against the sun, their cheers bubbling in the air like anticipation waiting to burst. I lined up with my classmates, adjusting the tassel on my cap. Around me, students buzzed with excitement, snapping photos, giggling, whispering about post-grad plans. I felt the nerves in my stomach twist, but beneath it all was something stronger: resolve. The ceremony opened with speeches from the principal and superintendent, both long-winded and full of cliches about bright futures. I barely heard them. My eyes scanned the bleachers until I found my family. There they were, sitting in a neat row. Dad stiff-backed with his sunglasses, Mom smiling politely, Ethan sprawled lazily, already bored, Claire arms folded, jaw tight, and Grandma Nora eyes twinkling as she searched for me. She spotted me and waved. I waved back, my throat tightening. For her, I thought. For me, our class salutatorian, a boy named Trevor, who had been Claire's shadow since freshman year, took the stage next. He was smug in the way only someone raised on constant praise could be. High school was a challenge, he began, but it was also where we learned who we truly are. Some of us discovered our love of sports, some of us discovered leadership, and some of us— He paused, scanning the crowd with mock gravity. Well, some of us discovered that studying isn't really our strong suit. Laughter rippled through the audience. My gut tightened. I knew exactly who he meant. He had spent years mocking me too, feeding off my siblings' jabs. Of course, Trevor added with a smirk. There are always surprises. Even the least likely among us can make it across the stage. Eventually. The laughter grew louder. I heard Ethan chuckle. Claire smirked. Dad shook his head like he was amused but unsurprised. My chest burned, humiliation rising like bile. But I clenched my fists in my lap. Fine. Laugh now. Wait. When the speeches finally ended, the principal returned to the podium, holding a crisp envelope. His tone shifted, his voice more deliberate. Every year, he said, our school recognizes one student who exemplifies perseverance, resilience, and academic growth. Someone who has overcome extraordinary challenges to rise above expectations. This year, the faculty voted unanimously for a student whose transformation has inspired us all. Whispers spread through the students. Everyone craned their necks, curious. My stomach dropped. Could it be? The principal smiled. This year's Resilience Award goes to Lena Carter. For a moment, the world froze. Then applause thundered across the field. My classmates clapped, some cheered, others gasped in surprise. I rose slowly, my legs trembling, my gown swishing around me. The spotlight wasn't just on me now, it was blazing. I walked toward the stage, heart pounding, and as I climbed the steps, I stole a glance at my family. Dad's sunglasses slipped down his nose, his mouth slightly open. Mom blinked rapidly, as if she wasn't sure she'd heard right. Ethan looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. And Claire, her face was pale, lips pressed tight, jaw locked in fury. But Grandma Nora? She was on her feet, clapping louder than anyone. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I accepted the plaque from the principal, his smile genuine. You've shown us all what determination looks like, Lena, he said softly. The crowd's applause echoed in my ears, washing over me like a wave. And in that moment, humiliation transformed into vindication. After I returned to my seat, I felt their eyes burning into me. Ethan leaned forward, hissing under his breath. What the hell was that? I kept my gaze forward. An award. Claire scoffed. They must have lowered the bar. My jaw tightened, but before I could respond, the principal moved on to the next segment, announcing the graduates who would be walking with highest honors. My breath caught. This was it. The part no one knew about. The announcer began reading names, and I waited, each second stretching like eternity. Finally, and Lena Carter graduating with honors distinction. The audience clapped again. Teachers smiled. My classmates turned, some with surprise, others with respect. But my family. The silence from their row was deafening. I didn't even look at them this time. I didn't need to. Their shock was the sweetest music I'd ever heard. When the last names were called, caps tossed in the air, and the crowd erupted in celebration, I knew the storm was coming. And it did. The moment we regrouped by the parking lot, Ethan exploded. "What the hell, Lena? Honors? Since when? Did you cheat or something?" I turned, my gown fluttering in the breeze. "No, I worked for it." Claire sneered. "Don't lie. You've been dumb your whole life. People don't just turn into geniuses overnight." My father's voice cut through, low and sharp. "Enough, Lena. Is this true? You actually made honors." I met his eyes for the first time in years without flinching. "Yes, it's true. And I didn't just make honors. I earned every single grade. While you were all laughing at me, I was working. While you were calling me dumb, I was proving you wrong." For once, none of them had a snide remark ready. They stood there, stunned, while my words hung in the air. Grandma Nora stepped forward, pride shining in her eyes. "I told you all. You never listened to her, but you'll listen now. This girl fought harder than any of you ever have." The silence that followed was delicious. But inside me, something sharper stirred. This wasn't the climax. This was only the revelation. The real justice was still to come. Graduation ceremonies always end in chaos. Families swarming the field for photos. Clusters of caps and gowns scattered across the grass. And teachers trying to corral students for one last group picture. But for me, the chaos was inside my chest. I had walked across that stage with honors. I had received the Resilience Award. The applause had rung in my ears like a song. Yet, standing in the parking lot, staring at my father's furrowed brow and my siblings' scowls, I realized something. This wasn't enough. They were still trying to twist it. Still trying to downplay what I'd accomplished. If I stayed quiet, if I slipped back into the background, they'd rewrite the story as Lena got lucky, or Lena had help. They'd erase my effort the way they always had. Not this time. The school had organized a small graduation reception in the gymnasium, complete with punch, cookies, and a microphone for anyone who wanted to thank teachers or share memories. It was informal, but the microphone sat there like an open door. As families poured inside, posing for pictures and laughing, I felt a spark ignite in me. This was it, my chance. My palms were sweaty, my throat dry, but my heart told me this was the moment I'd been waiting for. "Lena," Grandma Nora whispered beside me, sensing my restlessness. "Do what you need to do. I'm right here." I nodded, steadying my breath. When the vice principal asked if any graduates wanted to say a few words, a few brave classmates stepped up. They thanked their parents, their coaches, their favorite teachers. People clapped politely, snapping photos. Then my hand went up. The room shifted. A few whispers rippled. Nobody expected me, the quiet Carter kid, to take the microphone. I walked to the stage, each step deliberate. My family's eyes followed me, confusion etched on their faces. Claire's lips parted, almost in disbelief. Dad crossed his arms. Ethan muttered something under his breath. The microphone was warm in my hand. My heart pounded, but my voice came out steady. "Hi, I'm Lena Carter." A ripple of polite applause. "I know most of you don't really know me, or if you do, you probably didn't notice me much. And that's okay. For most of my life, I was easy to overlook. I wasn't the star athlete. I wasn't the strategenius. I wasn't the kid anyone bragged about at parent-teacher conferences. I was the kid people whispered about. The one they called dumb." A hush fell over the gym. Even the sound of shuffling feet stopped. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling just slightly, then gaining strength. I've been called dumb more times than I can count. At home, at school, by people who thought it was funny, by people who thought it was true. And for a long time, I believed it. I believed I was broken, that I wasn't enough, that no matter how hard I tried, I'd never measure up. I paused, scanning the crowd. My eyes landed briefly on my family, their faces pale, stiff, caught in the glare of truth. But here's the thing. I did try. I tried harder than anyone knew. While people laughed at me, I stayed up all night studying. While people mocked me, I practiced until my hands shook. And slowly, painfully, I proved to myself that I wasn't dumb at all, that I was capable, that I was worthy. Gasps echoed softly. Teachers nodded, some even teary-eyed. My classmates stared wide-eyed, as if seeing me for the first time. And today I continued, my voice rising. I walked across this stage with honors. Today I held an award that proves resilience matters just as much as talent. Today I proved every single person who called me dumb wrong. The applause that followed was deafening. People stood, clapping, cheering, some even whistling. And in that thunder, I felt years of humiliation crumbled to dust. As the applause died down, I let my eyes lock onto my family. I didn't name them, but the silence in their row was louder than any cheer. Everyone knew. Everyone could see the truth. For once, they couldn't hide behind smug jokes or dismissive chuckles. The crowd had witnessed my story, my pain, and my triumph. And my family's role in it was undeniable. Claire shifted uncomfortably, her cheeks flushed. Ethan stared at the floor. Dad rubbed his temples, his jaw clenched tight. Mom bit her lip, eyes darting nervously. But Grandma Nora? She was crying openly, clapping harder than anyone, pride radiating from her like sunlight. I handed back the microphone, my hand steady, my chest light. I had said what needed to be said. The reception buzzed with whispers and congratulations afterward. Teachers hugged me, telling me how proud they were. Classmates patted my back, some apologizing quietly for ever laughing at me. But my family, they looked like they'd been struck. When we finally regrouped near the exit, the silence was unbearable. Then Ethan snapped. "You didn't have to air our family business in front of everyone," he hissed. I turned calm and cold. "You didn't have to humiliate me for years." "But you did." Claire's voice dripped with venom. "You think one speech makes you better than us?" I stepped closer, meeting her glare. "No. What makes me better is that I climbed out of the pit you tried to bury me in. And I did it without tearing anyone else down." Her jaw dropped, but no words came. Dad tried to interject, his voice rough. "You embarrassed us, Lena." I stared at him, unblinking. "No, you embarrassed yourselves." I just told the truth. For once, he had nothing to say. As we walked to the car, families passed us, nodding at me, some whispering things like, "That speech was incredible," or "She's so brave." Each passing comment was another nail in the coffin of their mockery. By the time we reached the car, Claire muttered, "This is ridiculous. Everyone's acting like you're some kind of hero." I stopped, turned to face them all, my cap tassel swinging in the breeze. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just someone who refused to let you define me anymore. The words hung heavy, undeniable. They had no comeback, no laughter, just silence. And in that silence, I finally felt free. Justice didn't come with police sirens or courtroom drama. It came in the form of truth, spoken out loud, unashamed. It came in the way people now looked at me, not as the dumb Carter kid, but as someone strong, someone who fought back. It came in the way my family shrank in their seats while the world clapped for me. That was my justice. And it tasted sweeter than anything I could have imagined. The days after graduation felt surreal. I still woke up half expecting to hear Claire mocking me from down the hall, or Dad comparing me unfavorably to Ethan. But the house was quieter. Not because they had suddenly transformed into supportive cheerleaders. No. That would have been too much to expect, but because I had changed. For years, their voices had lived in my head like permanent echoes. "You're dumb. You'll never measure up. You're a disappointment." But after that ceremony, after that speech, those echoes finally began to fade. Because the truth was out. Not just whispered to my journal pages or typed on my old typewriter, but shouted into a microphone for the whole world to hear. And once spoken, the truth can't be buried again. The first dinner after graduation was strange. We sat around the table, but the usual script was broken. No one asked me if I failed a test. No one teased me about trying harder. Instead, the silence stretched thick. My father cleared his throat more than once, as though words itched at the back of his mouth but never quite formed. Finally, Mom broke the quiet. "So, what are your plans for the summer, Lena?" It was such a simple question, but coming from her, it felt monumental. She'd never asked before. "Not really." I looked up steady. "I'm working at the library, and I've been accepted into the creative writing program at State in the fall." Forks clinked. Claire's head snapped toward me. "Wait, you've got into State?" "Into the writing program?" I nodded. "Yes, full scholarship." Her mouth opened, closed, then stayed shut. Dad leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Scholarship?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Based on my grades?" "Based on essays I wrote." "Based on me." He said nothing, just stared at his plate. Ethan muttered something about wasting time with books, but didn't press when I didn't bite back. The silence wasn't approval, but it was acknowledgement. And for me, that was enough. A few days later, Grandma came over with a gift. It was a leather-bound journal, almost identical to the one I had wished for on my 15th birthday. "I thought it was time you had a proper one," she said, placing it in my hands. "Not a gift card for tutoring. Not something to fix you. Something that's yours." Tears stung my eyes as I hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Grandma, for everything. For believing in me when no one else did." She patted my cheek. "You did the hard part, sweetheart. You proved them wrong. But remember, you don't have to live your life proving anyone wrong anymore. You just have to live it, proving yourself right." Those words sank deep, etching themselves into me. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Thick paper, the State University crest embossed on the envelope. Inside was not only my scholarship confirmation, but also an invitation to share my graduation speech at their freshman orientation. They'd seen the recording. Someone had posted it online. I sat on my bed, clutching the letter, my heart swelling. The words I once whispered into a pillow had traveled farther than I ever imagined. When I told my family, the reactions were mixed. Mom's eyes softened. "That's wonderful, Lena." Dad grunted. "Well, don't let it go to your head." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Great. Now you're famous for whining." "But Claire." She was silent. She just stared at me, jaw tight, jealousy flickering in her eyes. And for the first time, I didn't care, because I wasn't living for their validation anymore. One evening, as I packed for college, Claire came into my room. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You made a fool out of us," she said flatly. I looked up from my suitcase. "No, Claire, you made a fool out of yourselves. I just stopped covering for you." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you're better than us now?" I smiled, calm and unshaken. "No, I think I'm better than the version of myself who used to believe you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She turned to leave, but not before muttering, "Don't think this changes everything." But it already had. College was a fresh start. No one there called me dumb. No one compared me to siblings or dismissed my efforts. Instead, professors praised my essays. Classmates admired my creativity, and I felt for the first time that I belonged. I joined the writing club. I published short stories in the school's literary magazine. I stood in front of classrooms reading my work aloud and felt strong instead of small. And every time doubt crept in, I remembered walking across that stage. I remembered the applause. I remembered my family's stunned silence. That memory became my anchor. Looking back now, I realize something important. My family's cruelty shaped me, yes, but it didn't define me. What defined me was how I chose to respond. I could have let their voices bury me forever. I could have believed the word dumb was my destiny. But I didn't. I fought. I clawed my way up one painful step at a time until I proved not just to them, but to myself, that I was more. And that's the lesson I want anyone listening to remember. You are not the names they call you. You are not the box they shove you into. You are not their dismissal or their doubt. You are what you choose to become in spite of them. Years later, when I returned home for the holidays, I found my honors certificate still taped above my desk. Faded, curling at the edges, but still there. I smiled, running my fingers over the paper. It wasn't just an award. It was proof of survival. proof of transformation, proof that I had turned humiliation into triumph. And though my family still stumbled over their pride, though Claire still bristled and Ethan still teased, none of it cut me anymore. Because I had already won. I had walked across that stage with honors. And in that moment, I left dumb behind forever. If you felt every twist of this story, don't let it end here. Hit that like button if you believe justice was finally served. And subscribe to join me for more true life dramas of family, betrayal, and redemption. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you're the first to know when the next story drops. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated or called something you weren't? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one, and your voice matters here. Until next time, remember, the sweetest revenge is living to tell your story.